Masechet Shevuot, Daf Yod Chet. We just mentioned the law in the Mishnah that if a man is in the middle of having intercourse with his wife, and she says in the middle, "Ooh, listen, I just became teme'ah. I just became a nidah. I felt blood." What he's supposed to do is wait there until he is not aroused and then remove himself. However, if he does not realize this, does not know this law, and he removes himself while still aroused, that's a problem because he is getting pleasure from that. And so if he does that unwittingly, he has to bring a korban hatat. If it was on purpose, we're not talking about that. We're talking about he didn't realize. That's why he brings a korban for being bo'el nida b'shogeg. We're going to continue and analyze this situation. Itemar. Abaye amar mishemeh de Rabbi Chia bar Rav chayav shetayim. Abaye says in the name of Rabbi Chia bar Rav that he has to bring not one but two korban hatats. We're going to see why in a minute. וכן אמר רבא אמר רב שמואל בר שבה אמר רב הונא חייב שתיים חדה הכניסה וחדה הפרישה. And also Rava said in the name of Rav Shmuel, the son of Shaba, in the name of Rav Huna, that this man is liable to two korban chatats. One for his entrance and one for his exit. Now the one for his exit we understand. He should have waited until he was no longer aroused and then exited. But what about the initial entrance? Why does he have to bring one for that? We're going to explain. Havi ba rabba b'mai ilema samuch levista ubeman ilema betamid chacham bishlama akenisa lichayev kasabar yachoni lib'ol ela perisha amai chayav mezid hu. So Rabbah wonders about this. What exactly is the case? If we're talking about a case where they had relations close to the expected time of her next period, we're going to see on Amud Bet that there is a prohibition for a man to be with his wife even though she is tehorah. So right now she is tahor, but if it's close to the time of her expected period, she has a regular cycle, and they calculate, and it's expected that she's going to see blood at this time, on this day, then there's a prohibition for a husband to be with his wife at that time, because even though she didn't see her period yet that day, it's likely that she will see it that day, and therefore we want to avoid this situation where she becomes nidah during intercourse. And so this person is going to bring a korban chatat for his entrance because it was samuch levisata, and he violated this law. Now, she was not yet a nidah, so he's not on purpose. He figured, probably we can be finished before she'll become nidah. So it is a mistake, but it's not a total mistake. It's not totally honest. If it's totally honest, if it's not near the time of her period, it's in the middle of when she's during her when she's totally clean, and then this could happen. Who knows? She becomes nidah. What was he supposed to do? He didn't do anything wrong. Then you would not even have to bring a korban hatat. It would be honest. Let's say it's the day after she went to the mikveh. So then there's no reason to suspect anything wrong. So let's say we're talking about such a case where it is in fact during the time of her period, and he should have been more careful and not had relations to begin with. All right, so now we're going to have a subcase within that. What kind of person are we talking about? Is it a Talmid Chacham who knows, he's a learned person, he knows the law? In that case, we understand that he should be liable to bring a korban chatat for entering, for starting intercourse on that day when he really should not have. He is liable. Now he thought, I will be able to perform intercourse with her and finish before she sees blood. Now, this was a mistake. Okay, it was a mistake. That's why he brings a korban chatat. It wasn't on purpose, but it wasn't honest. Fine. But for pirisha, for removing himself, why does he have to bring a korban? That it's only if it's by mistake, but he's a Talmid Chacham. So he knows the law. He knows the law, that is, he should wait until he's not aroused and then remove himself. And he didn't do that. He, knowing the law, knowing he's supposed to do that, removed himself intentionally while aroused and got pleasure from that. That's mezid. And if someone sins b'mezid, that's bo'el nida, that's karet. Not a korban. So if it's Tamid Chacham, he would only have to bring one korban. So that can't be the case. Vi be'ama aretz, idi v'idi, achal sheneh zete chele behalem ehad hu. If it's talking about Am Aretz, he doesn't know the law. He didn't know the law regarding if it's samuch leveseta. If it's the day of her expected period, then he should not have relations with her. He didn't know about that. He also didn't know the law that he should wait till he's not aroused before he removes himself. Okay, so he didn't know either law. Fine, he's bishogeg for both of them, but both of them were within one lapse of awareness, and therefore he should have to bring only one korban hatat, similar to someone who eats a kezait of cheleb, and sometime later he eats another kezait of cheleb, but he never realized in the meantime that he was doing anything wrong. He didn't know it was cheleb, he didn't know about the prohibition, so he didn't realize. He only brings one korban chatat, even though he did two acts of eating, two zetim, nevertheless within one lapse of awareness, then he only brings one korban chatat. If he realized in the middle, and then he said, I ate something wrong. And then he did it again, and then realized again after, you have to bring two. But it's all within one he'elem, only one korban. And therefore, if it's an Am Aretz, we presume he doesn't know either of these laws, but he did both of them within one lapse of awareness, so only one korban chatat. So we still don't have a case of a person who would bring two korban chatats. Okay, so let's assume it's not during the time her expected period. So what kind of person are we talking about? If it's a learned person, he won't have to bring any korban chatat, not even one. Why? Because regarding kenisa, he's anus. When he entered, started bi'ah with her, so this is not during the time of her veset, so he did nothing wrong. He's just having regular relations with his wife, permitted to him during the time when it's not expected that she's getting her period. So, and all of a sudden, she became nida, totally beyond his control, so he doesn't have to bring korban for that. And the fact that he removed himself while still aroused, he's a Tamid Chacham, he should have known better. So that's mezid, and you don't bring a korban for mezid. So one act is anus, one act is mezid. Neither of them bring a korban. If it's an Am Aretz, then upon his entrance, that's also anus, and only upon his exit, he didn't know this law, so that's bishogeg. Fine, that's only one korban, and so we don't have a case where someone would have to bring two korbans. Hadar amar Rava leolam besamuch levisata ubetamid chacham lezo ve'en tamid chacham lezo. And afterwards, Rava thought about it more, and he says, I have a case. We're talking about a case where it is in fact at the time of her expected period. She didn't get her period yet, but it's at the time when we would expect it. Therefore, he should not have had relations with her. And it is talking about a Tamid Chacham, but not a full Tamid Chacham. He knew the law that he is supposed to refrain from being with his wife at that time when her period is expected. He did know that law. He figured, but she didn't have period yet. I think we could complete intercourse before she starts bleeding. He made a mistake. Okay, that's bishogeg, so we'd have to bring a korban for that. However, he's not a complete Tamid Chacham. He didn't get that far in Shulchan Aruch. He read a few of the simanim. He didn't read all of them. And so he did not know the law regarding removal, that he has to wait until he is not aroused. That he didn't know. So he removed himself immediately, not knowing the law. He has to bring a korban for that. So that's the case where someone has to bring two korbanot when it is in fact near the time of a period. He made a mistake regarding entry, and he also made a mistake regarding the exit because he didn't know that second law. Amar Rava, v'tarvaihu taninhu. Rava says, we learned in a Tannaitic source both of these laws. Kenisa tanena, perisha tanena. We learned the law that someone who enters at a time that should be near the veset, when he should have been more careful, is liable. And we also learned that perisha, if he removes himself while aroused, that also he has to bring a korban. And let's see what those sources are. Perisha tanena. The case of exiting, that we learned in our Mishnah. If a person was in the middle of intercourse with his wife who was tehora, and then she said, I became tameh, if he removes himself immediately, he is liable. He should have waited. Good, so that's a clear source. Kinisa, Tanena, and regarding entry, also we have a Mishnah in Masechet Nida that teaches, Nimsa al shelo, temein v'chayavin bekorban, ma'ila besamuch levista v'akinisa. It says, after they've completed intercourse, he cleans himself, and he sees some blood was on his male member. In that case, both of them are tameh, because anyone who sleeps with nida, she's tame'ah because she's nida, and he slept with her. He's also becomes tameh, ritually impure in terms of eating terumah, going to the mikdash, and also both of them have to bring a korban hatat. So is this not talking about a case where it was the expected time of her period and he entered into her knowing that that was the time and he wasn't so careful? He should have been more careful. She should have been more careful. So both violate. They didn't do it on purpose because at the time that they started, she wasn't yet nida. They figured we'll have time. But it's not totally honest because they knew that this was the expected time when she would see blood. So is this not a good source for the Mishnah that teaches that if someone begins intercourse with his wife at the time of her expected period, that they have to bring a korban? It says so right here. Amar leRav Ada bar Matana leRava leolam emalach b'shelo samuch levisita ve'aperisha. However, Rav Ada bar Matana tells Rava, not necessarily. It could be that this Mishnah is talking about not during the time of her expected period, and the reason why they have to bring a korban is because he removed himself while still aroused. She said, it's the same case as the perisha. She said, I just felt blood, and he removed himself right away, and that's why they have to bring a korban. And if you'll ask, why do I need another Mishnah to teach us a law of exiting? We already have the Mishnah here in Masechet Shevuot taught that. So why would I need a second Mishnah to teach us the same thing? Well, I could answer that. We need this law. Actually, we don't need this law. It's only recited here in this Mishnah because it's continuing the case of the Resha. It says in the Resha that if she found blood on her after they completed intercourse, she thought she was tehorah. They finished intercourse, and then she found blood on herself. Then both of them are temeim. Besafek. See here, we don't know, did she see this blood during intercourse and then they'd both be tameh, or did this blood start only after they finished intercourse, in which case, well, she's tameh from that, but he would not be tameh. So out of safek, we have to assume that he's tameh also. But neither of them have to bring a korban, because you only bring a korban hatat if you know for sure that you sinned. But they don't know for sure that they sinned. It could be that the blood that she saw came after. You see, if the blood is on him, which is the other case in that Mishnah, then, well, how did it get on him? Obviously, it's from her, so that means she was nida while he was inside her. So then they are both liable to a korban. But if the blood is only on her, then we don't know. And out of a safek, we do not bring a korban. So that was actually the main thing that the Mishnah wanted to teach us. And since it mentioned that case, so then it brought the contrast case. If she sees it on her rag when she wipes herself, there's no korban. But if he sees it on himself, on his rag when he wipes himself, then you do have to bring a korban. So this is only brought by the way, and it could be its repetition. Since it's only brought by the way, it wasn't actually brought here to teach a new law, but so it could be that it's about perisha, and even though we know it from our Mishnah here in Masechet Shevuot is the primary place where we learn regarding perisha. Over there, it's just mentioned as by the way, as a tangent, and so there's no problem with the fact that it's a repetition. Amar le Ravina le Rav Ada, mi masit lo kma lahi bishelo samuch levista ve'a perisha. And now Ravina, who was Rav Ada's teacher, challenges him and says, can you really say that Mishnah in Masechet Nida about the man who after he finishes, he finds blood on his member, on the rag that he used to wipe himself, that is talking about a case where it is not near the time of her expected period, and it's because he is liable because he exited while aroused, and that's why he would be liable to a korban. Doesn't make any sense to explain the Mishnah that way. It says in the Mishnah that he found the blood on the rag after he exited, and he wiped himself. When you say he found it, that sounds like it's after the fact, and he didn't realize while he was in the act. Now, if you say it's talking about the case of Pirisha, a case of Pirisha means while he's in the act, the woman says, oh, I just became a nida. And then he's supposed to leave while not aroused, but if he leaves while aroused, so then he is liable. But in that case, he already knows that he has slept with a nida even before he exits. So he by meikara from the beginning he knew that would not be any surprise, that any new realization for seeing the blood on the rag. And therefore, since he found the blood on the rag and only then realized that she was nida, that must be talking about a case not when she told him something in the middle, and then the problem is that he left while aroused, but rather this is a problem of entering, and it was during the time of her veset, and he should not have entered her in the first place. And he figured, it will be okay. She won't see blood until after we finish, and then he finishes, and after he finishes, he finds blood. Well, then he knows he made a mistake, and that's why he has to bring a korban. So that word nimsa shows that, in fact, this Mishnah in Nida is a source for the prohibition of entering, and that's one of the two prohibitions, and now we have a Mishnah for both. So Ravina is upholding the Mishnah in Nida as a source for entering against Rav Ada. Amar le Rava Sayit Maideka Amar Rabach. Now Rava is rubbing in this challenge of Ravina, because Rava also thinks that this Mishnah is a good source for entering, and so he tells Rav Ada, you should listen to what your teacher said. Rava agrees with it also, but now Rava is happy that he has support from Ravina, so he tells Rav Ada, listen to him. But then Rav Ada has a response, and he says, Hechi masit, how can I listen to him? I have a baraita that supports my view. The Tanya Allah. There is a baraita about that Mishnah in Nida that says, Zohi misvat aseh shebenida shechayavin aleha, v'im ita misvat lo ta'asehi. The baraita says, this is a misvat aseh regarding Nida, for which one is liable. Now, if you say it's talking about Pirisha, which is what Rav Ada said, Pirisha, leaving, is a misvat aseh. There's a misvat lo ta'aseh to sleep with a Nida. There's a misvat aseh that if you find yourself in a situation where you're in the middle of intercourse and she says, I'm a Nida, you have a misvat aseh to not continue, but to wait and leave. It's the same misvat aseh that we mentioned before. If someone is in the temple courtyard, they went in, tahor, all of a sudden they become tameh, now they have a misvat aseh to leave right away. So if you say, according to me, that this Mishnah is talking about Pirisha, that's why the Baraita says this is a mitzvat aseh. But according to you, that is talking about entering, that's a mitzvat lo ta'aseh. If one begins intercourse with a woman during the time of her period and she ends up being a nida, that is a prohibition of sleeping with a nida. So according to your interpretation, the Mishnah should have said lo ta'as. The Baraita, commenting on the Mishnah, should have said this is a mitzvat lo ta'aseh. Rava has an answer. Amar le itanena chaser. It says if I recite that baraita, it is missing words, and this is the proper way to read that baraita. It sounds like itanena. Not everybody knew every baraita or accepted every baraita. So even if that baraita is authentic, it's missing words, and this is how you should recite it. Utenehachi. Zoi misvat lo ta'aseh shebenida shechavin aleha. That case that you were talking about, where a man found blood on his rag after he finished and he checked and he wiped himself, that is a misvat lo ta'aseh, because that's a case where he entered during at the wrong time, at the time of our expected period. It turns out now he sees blood. He violated a law ta'aseh of sleeping with a nida, and that's the law ta'aseh for which one is liable. However, haya mishamesh im hatehora v'amra lo nitmeti ufiresh miyad chayav zohi misvat aseh shebenida. But the other case is if he was already having intercourse and she was tehora, and then in the middle of intercourse, she says, "Oh, I became tameh," and he immediately exited. He is liable for exiting because he should have waited, and this has to do with a misvat aseh. Now he's bringing a korban because he violated the lot. He only bring a korban for violating a lot aseh, not an aseh. So he's violating still the lot aseh of sleeping with a nida. But this relates to the misvat aseh of leaving immediately. He thought that he was doing the right thing by following the misvat aseh and leaving immediately. Really, he should not have left immediately. He should have waited until he would not be aroused. And so, in fact, the Baraita does talk about a misvat aseh, but you're missing the words. You're missing the case in the middle. And in fact, the Mishnah Nida is talking about just the lo ta'aseh of entering in the first place a woman while she is expecting her period, during the time when she would expect her period, and turns out after the fact, they didn't realize during, but then after the fact, he sees blood and he realizes, oh, I was bo'el enida, then he has to bring a korban. And in fact, according to Rava, the Mishnah in Nida about the rag is talking about a case of entering, and so now we have a source from Mishnayot, both in the case of Pirisha, of exiting, and also the case of entering. Amar Mor, Peresh miyad chayav hechi abid. We quote the Mishnah that said, if someone is in the middle of intercourse and the wife says, oh, I just became nida, if he exits immediately, he is liable. So we want to examine that. What should he do? Amar Rav Huna mishmet Rava no'es sipona bakarka ad she'amut ve'tubeh. He should stick his 10 fingernails into the ground or into the bed and do nothing, be totally still until his member is not aroused, and that will be good for him, and then he exits while not aroused. That's what he should do instead of exiting immediately. Amar Rava zot omeret hamshamesh met barayot patur. Rava says we can learn a halacha from this, that if someone has relations with someone who is prohibited to him, but he has relations when not aroused, then he is not liable. We can prove it from here. How do we prove it? Diisa kadatech chayav hacha maitama patur mishum danusu yanusu ki peresh miyad namep nipatar anusu. Because if you think that someone who has relations with anyone who's prohibited to, but while not aroused, if you would say that person is liable, then in this case, when he's not aroused, how can we tell him wait and then exit? So in this case, why would he be not liable? Well, I know you'll answer, because it's beyond his control. How was he supposed to know when he began when he entered the woman, she was tehora? So how is he supposed to know that she's all of a sudden going to become nida in the middle? It's beyond his control, and that's why he is not liable when not aroused. Well, then you can apply the same thing to when he exits immediately while aroused, right? If it's anus, circumstances beyond his control, where if he leaves immediately while aroused, let him also be not liable, because how is he supposed to know that she would become nida in the middle, and should be not liable. But we don't say that. Instead, we do make a distinction between leaving immediately while aroused, that's liable, versus waiting while not aroused, then he is not liable. Why do we make a distinction? It must be in general that if someone has relations with someone prohibited, but the relations is done while not aroused, he's patur in all cases. Isn't that a good conclusion? Abaye says not necessarily. I could argue that if someone has relations even while not aroused, with someone he's prohibited to, he will be liable. In this case, why is he not liable when she becomes nida in the middle of intercourse? Mishum danusu, because here he has no other choice. He's already inside. What is he going to do? And that which you asked. When he leaves immediately, why is he liable when he leaves immediately? Why don't you say, well, what is he supposed to do? So there is a distinction between how much pleasure one gets. He should have waited, and then he would have had only a little bit of pleasure. Instead, he left immediately while aroused, and he gets a lot of pleasure. And so, in fact, the act of intercourse is prohibited no matter what. With someone who's prohibited, it doesn't matter whether he's aroused or not. So one would not be allowed to initiate intercourse with anybody he's prohibited to, whether aroused or not, and one would be liable. That's true. In this case, since he already started intercourse, when he started, it was permitted. She was tehorah. Now, in the middle, he finds himself inside. What is he supposed to do? Well, he should minimize, do as little as possible, and minimize means minimize the pleasure. So he should have been, if by not minimizing the pleasure, maximizing it, so then he's liable. He could have done something lesser. So he should do as little as possible. As long as he does the minimum sin possible, then he's patur. But if he doesn't do the minimum possible, then he is liable. And we're now going to compare this to the person who is tahor when he enters into the temple courtyard, and then he becomes tameh. He has the same law. He became tameh, beyond his control. Okay, what is he supposed to do? But now he's in the middle there, so he has to get out. He has to leave the shortest way possible. As long as he minimizes the time that he is in there, he doesn't wait 10 seconds to bow. He doesn't go the long way. He leaves immediately, as quickly, as short as possible. Then he's not liable. But if he hangs around, if he delays, then he is liable. So that's the same thing here. Amar le Rabba bar Chanan le Abaye. Im ken masinu aruka uksara benida. So Rabba bar Chanan tells Abaye, look, we see that there is a long way and a short way regarding nidah, just like regarding someone who becomes tameh in the temple. There's a long way. He goes the long way, he's liable. The short way, he's not liable. So too with nidah. If he waits and he's not aroused and he has minimal pleasure, that's like the short way, then that's okay. But if he leaves immediately, that's like the long way, because he got more pleasure than necessary. Ve'anan ba'mikdash tenan. And now he wonders, how come in the Mishnah it only made a distinction between the long path and the short path regarding the mikdash? If he goes a short path, he's okay. Long path, he's liable. Why doesn't it also say the long and the short path, and say, and also regarding nidah, there's the same thing, long and short path? Ela mishum de la dameh aruka dahacha kesera datam varuka dahatam kesera dacha. And the answer is the Mishnah does not talk about it because they are not exactly the same. They're not exactly parallel. In fact, they're the opposite. They're flipped around. The long path here, the long path regarding nidah, is to wait a long time. Wait a few minutes until you're not aroused, and only then exit. Well, that long time in nidah is the same as that's a good thing, is the same law as going the short path in the temple. By leaving fast in the temple, then you're not liable. So the fast way in the temple is that law is equal to the long period of time regarding nida when one waits. And aruka dehatam, the long period of time regarding the temple, if you leave the long way, then you're liable. That's the same as not waiting, doing the short time regarding nida, not waiting when the one is liable. So because they're flipped around, that's why the Mishnah doesn't say and also nida, because they don't match up, they don't parallel exactly. But in fact, as long as you flip them around, there is a long case and a short case. Matkif la Rav Huna bere de Rav Natan. Mi amar Abaye anus hu. And now we have a challenge from Rav Huna, the son of Rav Natan. Did Abaye really say that someone who's in the middle of intercourse and then she says amnida, that he's considered anus? Is that true? That's what you just said. Alma bishelo samuch levisatan kamdinan. Well then, this must be a case where it's not during the expected time of her period. Because if it's during the expected time of a period, then the husband should know, and she should know, oh, this is around the time when she's expecting it. You should not begin relations, and then that would not be anus. You should, it's not beyond one's control. You should have expected this and not had relations in the first place. But Abaye, at the beginning of the stuff, says regarding the Mishnah that if one is in this situation, he's liable to 2 counts. Once for entering, because it's the time of her veset, and she should have known. And second, for leaving immediately while aroused, which means it is the time of her veset. So which one is it? And the answer is ki itemad Abaye ba'alma itemad. When Abaye said that he's liable to bring 2, he was talking about a general case, not the specific case of a Mishnah. He was saying if it were a case where one was close to the time of the veset and he entered, that would be liable to 1, and then for exiting immediately, it would be liable to another. But he wasn't saying that about this specific Mishnah. In fact, in this Mishnah by itself, it could be that it was not the time of her veset, and then he's liable just to 1 for exiting while aroused when he should have waited. There's 2 brothers. Rabbi Yonatan asks his brother, Rabbi Shimon, they're both the son of Yosef ben Lakonya. Where do we find the prohibition against sleeping with a nida in the Torah? So the other brother says, Shekal kala petakbe, azara lebo nida ve'elisha benida tumata lo tikrav. He took a clod of earth and threw it at him and said, you're asking where do you find the prohibition for someone who sleeps with a nida? It's an explicit pasuk. A woman who is impure by her uncleanness, being nida, you shall not approach. Don't even come close to her. Do not uncover her nakedness. You're asking like it's a serious question? Well, where can we find? Is there a hint? Is there some kind of gizera shava or something? Why are you asking such a silly question? No, rather, the question that Rabbi Yonatan was asking was more complex. He was asking, where is the warning regarding someone who's in the middle of intercourse when they started while she was tehora? And she says in the middle, oh, I became tameh. How do we know that he's prohibited from exiting immediately and that he should wait? That's the question. Amar Chizkiya Amar Kira Uti nidata alav afilu b'shat nidata tehe alav. Because there's a different pasuk that says if a man lies with her and her menstrual flow shall be upon him, right? Tehi nidata alav, which sounds like that she became nida at the time. So even if they are already having relations at the time, then when she becomes nida, still the prohibition applies that he cannot continue. Rather, he cannot leave immediately because then he gets pleasure. Rather, he has to wait. Ashkechan aseh lo taseh minalan. From this pasuk, we only find a misvat aseh. There's no lo taseh here. It just says if a person lies with his wife and she is nida, okay, then it's a problem. He must leave in the correct way. So we learn in misvat aseh that he must stop and leave in the correct way. That's a misvat aseh. But how do you know that he violates also a lo ta'aseh? Amar papa amar kera, lo tikrav name lo tifroshu, dichtiv, ha'omerim kerab elecha, al tigash bi, ki kiddashticha. Because the pasuk says that when someone is in nidas, this pasuk here, ve'elisha b'nidat tumata lo tikrav, don't even come close. In the Peshat reading, lo tikrav is probably just a euphemism for actual relations, but we learned it as don't even come close. It's an extra prohibition. Now, this word lo tikrav can also refer to do not leave, do not withdraw immediately. How do you know that the word tikrav can mean withdraw? Because of pasuk in Yeshaya that says, those who say, withdraw to yourself, come not near to me, for I am holier than you. So you see the word kerav, they say, kerav, elecha, withdraw to yourself. Kerav means do not, it means to withdraw. When it says lo tikrav, it means do not withdraw. If you're in such a situation where the wife says, oh, I am nida right now, do not withdraw immediately, rather wait. And so here we see the negative prohibition. Tenor banan, v'izartem et bnei Yisrael mitumatam, amar Rabbi Yoshia, mikan azara libnei Yisrael shifreshu mineshotehen, samuch levistan, v'chama, amar Rabba ona. Now another braita that says, one, that you should separate the people of Israel from their uncleanliness. What does this teach me? That you should separate them. Obviously, if she's nida, then they should separate. What's this extra v'hizartem? Rabbi Yoshia explains this is a warning, a prohibition to Bnei Israel that they should separate from their wives, not only when they actually become nida, but even at the time when she expects to become nida. And how long is that? Ona, which means a 12-hour period, either daytime or nighttime. If usually every a certain amount of days she becomes nida in the daytime, then that number of days later during the day they cannot be together, and that way they'll be careful and not find themselves in a situation like we just described. Amar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, kol sheno poresh mishto samuch levista, afilu avyan lo banim kibnei Aaron metim dichtiv, v'izartem et bnei Yisrael mitumatam v'hadava b'nidata usmichle achare mot. Rabbi Yochanan says the name of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Anyone who does not separate from his wife near the time of her expected period, even if he has children who are as righteous as the children of Aharon, they will die, because the pasuk says in Vayikra 15 at the end, you shall separate, that's where the pasuk we just quoted from, separate children of Israel from their uncleanliness. This is a law regarding all these people, and someone who has dava benidata, regarding someone who is a nida. You have to make sure to teach all these laws and make sure that Israel will be careful with them. And the very next pasuk is acharemot, after the death of the sons of Aharon. Why these two paragraphs back to back with each other? To teach you that if someone does not separate, then even if he has righteous children, they will die. Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan kol haporesh mishto samuch levista v'yan lo banim zecharin. And now we have the opposite in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Anyone who does separate from his wife around the time of her expected period will have male children. Dichtiv lehavdil ben hatameh u ben hatahor usmich le isha ki tazriya v'yaled zachar. And we learn this from the pasuk that says to distinguish between impure and pure. So if you're going to be very careful with purity and impurity and separate even during this time, then the very next chapter says if a woman conceives and has a male child. So there you go. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Amar Havyan lo banim Rabbi Yoshua adds that he'll have children, not only male children, but he'll have children who will be knowledgeable, so knowledgeable that they'll be able to teach others, because the chapter before that says to separate and to teach. And so that's connected with the pasuk that's in chapter 10, and that's connected with the pasuk in chapter 11. Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan kol hamdil ala yain b'moseh shabbatot havyan lo banim zecharim dichtiv l'havdil ben hakodesh uben hachol. And while we're at it, Rabbi Yochanan teaches other things that will bring male children. Anyone who says Havdalah with wine on Motzei Shabbat will have male children, as the pasuk in Vayikra 10 says, to separate between holy and not holy. That's Havdalah. Uchtiv hatam lehavdil ben hatahor usmichle ishaki tazriya. And it also says there in the next chapter to distinguish between pure and impure, as we said before, and that itself is connected to if a woman gives birth to a male child. And so by connecting all of these, that also saying Havdalah will give someone male children. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi Amar, and if someone says Havdalah on wine, also they will not only have boys, but they will have children who will be knowledgeable and be able to teach. Amar Rabbi Binyamin bar Yefet Amar Rabbi Elazar, Kol mekadesh et asmo b'shat tashmish, havyan lo banim zecharin, shenemar, v'tkadishtem v'tem kedoshim, usmich le isha ki tazriya. And Binyamin, the son of Yefet, says the name of Rabbi Elazar, anyone who sanctifies himself, he conducts himself in a modest way before he has relations with his wife, then he also will have boys, as the pasuk says, sanctify yourselves and you shall be holy. That's in Vayikra chapter 11. And then right after that in chapter 12 it says, if a woman has a male child. And so all these are various ways of having a male child. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.